folks, this is Woody back in the shed. When I left you at the end of the last production, the summer of 21 part 2, I gave you a hint of what the next modification to the Moss Trooper would be. I'd also intended to cover some aspects of mounting cameras on the aircraft, but since this gets a bit involved, I decided to postpone that until later. But the test shots you'll see in this video were taken on this mount, which is a replacement for the rear access hatch. I used two different cameras, and you'll see the advantage of spending a little money on kit that offers image stabilization, even if it's not perfect. The vibrations affected one much more than the other, and we'll cover the reasons for that in a future production. So, putting in the smoke system. The idea for this came about after my grand tour of British airfields in July. I watched the Ravens display team at Sleep doing their amazing stuff and thought that the smoke trails really made the display flow. Of course, this isn't a new idea, and all the professional teams use it, but for an amateur production it really raises the value for the spectators. I thought then maybe I can do that. This is all just in the way of a little fun project. The SD-1 isn't aerobatic, but it is very manoeuvrable. So much so that I could, if I was allowed, do a flat show within the boundary of most small airstrips. This would look really good if I was trailing a line of smoke. Also, I can't say that skywriting is likely to be something I do often, but it's now legal, so who knows. I did some research. How do the top guys make smoke trails? Well, it turns out to be nothing really much more complicated than squirting oil into the exhaust, which then turns it into smoke and blows it out the pipe. So, all I need is a container, some suitable oil, a pump, and some means of getting the oil into the exhaust. Simples. That's what I thought, anyway. Actually, most of the process is simple, that is. To begin and get an idea of the bits needed, I looked at the commercially available kits. The one that seemed to fit the bill for my small installation was designed for paramotors. The spec wasn't high. A plastic bottle, a 12-volt pump, a simple switch, a bit of tube, and a nozzle that clamped to the exhaust with a Jubilee clip. It was powered by a torch battery. This collection of bits, otherwise lying about in the shed, was going to cost the equivalent of 200 litres of MOGAS. That'll keep me airborne for about 3 months. So no, surely I can do better than that. So here's what I converted that spec into. A 2.5 litre plastic container that fits perfectly into the camping box under the fuel tank. A 12-volt pump designed to push smoke oil into model aeroplane exhausts. I had to get this from the USA, but even then it was cheap in comparison to the other options. I can use the aircraft electrical system to power it. I needed a couple of meters of plastic tube of the right diameter, and I decided I'd have 2 switches. One would be fixed to the throttle lever and be a simple on-off switch. The other would be in the line to the pump and act as a safety master switch and have a light in it to confirm that everything was working. I also put a panel-mounted 2-amp fuse into the circuit just in case. Of course, some suitable oil that wasn't going to turn the exhaust into a blowtorch was also going to be needed. There are a number of different oils or combination of fluids that folk have used. These range from cooking oil, baby oil, neat diesel fuel, auto transmission fluid, paraffin, concrete form release agent. The list's pretty long. I didn't want to cause a stink, quite literally, so cooking oil and similar smelly stuff was out. I didn't want to set myself on fire or choke anyone with fumes, so diesel and paraffin were off the menu as well. I eventually settled on the type of mineral oil that's used on wooden work surfaces for food preparation. This is non-toxic, obviously, clean, won't stain the aeroplane pink or green or some other odd colour, and doesn't smell like a chip shop on a Friday night. It costs about £25 for 5 litres. I've also bought some proper smoke oil from a UK company for about the same price, but I can't compare the two products yet. I've only tested the food oil, and that's what the videos you'll see later on will show, although the nozzles will differ. And obviously I needed some means of getting the oil into the exhaust. This turned out to be the trickiest part of the whole project. I thought that it'd be simple just to drill a hole into the exhaust downpipe, stick a suitably small diameter tube through the hole, and then seal it in with ceramic cement, all suitably reinforced with a clamp of some kind, just like the paramotor system I mentioned before. That's all there ought to be to it, I thought. Well, it took 5 attempts using various bits of brass, steel tube, nuts, bolts, screws, washers, exhaust putty, high heat JB weld, extreme heat JB weld, locking wire, and a lot of frustration. The nozzle has, ideally, to be able to spray a fan-shaped jet of oil to get the best smoke. This is the commercial brass nozzle that fits into an M4 riv nut. From my experiments, it doesn't produce a fan-shaped spray, but a jet. The other problem with this is it's designed to accept a plastic or high-temperature rubber hose because it's designed for giant-scale model aircraft, and that, I guess, don't have the same temperature extremes that I have, and I believe the temperatures involved might make this quite a risky option. I tried to fit it into a steel tube that would act as a heat sink, but I couldn't find anything that would make a good seal and stand up to the vibration as well, even with lots of JB weld of various kinds used as sealant cement. After constant leaks, I had to abandon that plan, and in the end I drilled out the M4 nut and replaced it with an M6 riv nut and threaded the end of a stainless steel tube to go into it. That way there was no high stress joint at the nozzle and no opportunity for leaks outside the exhaust tube. What I wanted to avoid was anything that needed welding or brazing and would be difficult to reverse if it all went wrong. The wire brace is there to remove the bending stresses on the nozzle arrangements as the engine vibrates quite a bit under load. The internal end of the tube has an M5 thread cut to take a screw which has been drilled and cut to allow the oil to flow through it and fan out at the end. The screw head was cut off after it was all fitted together. This allows the nozzle assembly to be fitted or removed with the exhaust elbow still in place. This is the commercial version of what I made. The smallest drill that would go the length of the screw without breaking was 0.9 of a millimetre, but I wanted a 0.5 hole. So I threaded a bit of 0.4 locking wire through the tube and screw to close it up a bit. This will also allow me to vary the nozzle diameter later on if I feel it needs a bit of tweaking without having to take everything apart. Fitting the bits into the aircraft was fairly straightforward. The smoke oil tank fits neatly into the camping box, and the plastic pipe is 6mm internal diameter. It is very slightly too big to be a tight fit on the pump inlet, but anything smaller, like the 4mm tube that you think would be perfect, is too narrow to allow a decent flow of oil. It's also quite weak given the pump pressure, which we'll see the results of in a minute. The pump is attached to the fuselage side using a Velcro strip. The output line runs along the wiring loom and passes through the firewall via a steel tube and up to the injector via a short length of fuel hose. The electrical connections are as I described, and give a positive visual confirmation that the pump's running. The pump's quite noisy though, and there's some electrical noise when it's running too, so the LED light and the switch could be dispensed with, although I think a master safety brake in addition to the trigger switch is a good idea. I say that because what you see here is a third version of that trigger. The first, a simple push button, jammed. The second, a miniature toggle switch, was too easily knocked by mistake as I worked the throttle. So this, a slimline 12-volt rocker switch, is the current fit. It seems to work well as long as you don't wear thick gloves. I mentioned the hose diameter a minute ago. While I was trying to film the switching sequence, the output line did in fact split. I was so busy trying to get the video I didn't notice a stream of oil being injected at high pressure. The next modification will be to put the pump into a box of some kind so that if the joint fails again, at least the oil won't go quite as far as it did this time. It's a right old mess, but at least the control runs will never rust. Once I'm happy with everything, I'll put a non-return valve in the pickup line to keep the pump primed. The initial ground tests were quite encouraging, and it was difficult to get much idea of how it would be affected by the prop wash at high speed. The only way to test this was to go flying with some witnesses. As you can see, there's a distinct smoke trail which seems to pulse in time with the engine stroke, as you'd expect. It's quite thick when seen in the cockpit mirrors, but less so from a distance. This is a smoke ring which took about 40 seconds to make, and you can see that the hang time isn't great. We need more smoke. And go back to the bench. This is the slightly enlarged nozzle using the basic mineral oil. Hang time is greater and the trail much more obvious against the grey sky. I think that a little more tuning might get us where we want to be, so back on the ground, back to the bench, out with the toolkit, off with the cowling for the 100th time. These engine covers get unbuttoned more often than Brigitte Bardot's blouse. So, how does the system perform? Am I going to be any competition for the red arrows? Well, I'll let you judge. The public debut of the smoky Minisport was at the Kirimior Fly-In at the end of October 2021. 3 Burney Flying Circus stalwarts made it to the event. That was Don Kedick, Orson Cart and Even Keel, which kind of signalled the end of the social flying season for us this year. Aaron and his dad made us welcome with their now traditional barbecue and a grand tour of the newly completed Castle Christie. There was a good turnout from the locals and some from across the border as well. And Jill and Berry were there from Squadron Prince, complete with a battery of expensive cameras to record the event. So the majority of these images are courtesy of them. Orson Cart provided the airborne chase camera, having taken off virtually hanging onto my tail wheel, so that must have looked pretty cool. So, the verdict. Not something everyone will be interested in, I know, but a fun experiment with some potential for more amusement. I need to experiment further with nozzle shapes, oil mixtures and all that, but overall I'm pleased with the result, and for very little financial cost. The pump costs about £20 from the USA. The behind the firewall bits like switches were already in the spares box, but would cost less than £10 to get, and the firewall forward parts were homemade. Since the pump shifts the oil at 750 mils a minute, I've got about 7 minutes of smoke for every 5 litres. I can make that cheaper by mixing a little diesel fuel or other stuff into it, but unless this increases the smoke output significantly, I reckon $5 a minute is cheap for the big smile it gets and the big smile it gives. Okay, thanks for watching. Since we're getting towards the end of the year, the next productions will be, let's say, a little bit different. A bit of nostalgia combined with what I hope you might find funny. So, keep an eye out for some Moss Trooper Christmas cheer to offset the COVID curse, and if you don't want to miss it, why not subscribe? Hit the button below, and you won't miss out.